Good morning and welcome. My name is Kate Anderson, and I have the pleasure of serving as the project director for the National Vocational Rehabilitation Technical Assistance Center on Program Evaluation and Quality Assurance. We welcome you this morning, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for this webinar. The PEQA Technical Assistance Center is funded by the Rehabilitation Services Administration. And over the past 5 years, we have had the absolute pleasure of working with our colleagues across state vocational rehabilitation programs. To date, we've worked with colleagues in over 37 state VR agencies. Today's participants have worked diligently to complete the online coursework and capstone projects in collaboration with their capstone mentors. And today you will be hearing from our colleagues Amanda Arnold and Alice Porter from the state of Vermont, Andrew Gray from the state of Idaho, Kira Hollywood from the state of Texas, and Kelly Scott from the state of Kentucky. We'd also like to congratulate our panelists today. The work that you will be seeing today and through their presentations really is the culmination of months of work and diligent effort. And today they are officially graduating from the PEQA program. So congratulations to you all. It has been such a pleasure working together, and we look forward to learning more about your evaluation and quality assurance projects in terms of your design, how you implemented your results, and kind of takeaway messages that other state VR programs can use in their practice as well. So again, good morning and welcome. And with this, I believe I will be turning the microphone over to Amanda and Alice.
Great, thanks so much, Kate. Thanks everyone for being here this morning. We're really excited to have the opportunity to share our capstone project with you all. I'm Amanda Arnold. I'm the Quality Assurance Manager with Voc Rehab Vermont, and I'm joined by my partner in crime today, Alice, who I'll let introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Alice Porter, Planning and Evaluation Unit Manager with Voc Rehab Vermont, and this show is really Amanda's project. We had a sort of team project where I worked on the dashboard part of it, which we presented at the Summit Conference in November. So this is really focused on Amanda's work.
All right, with that, Alice always sells herself short. She's had a lot of contributions to that. But the title of our capstone is really sort of a mouthful. It's the Vermont Case Review Process Guide, Assessing and Delivering High Quality Services to VR Customers. And it was really our intention throughout our capstone to make sure that we were developing a tool that wasn't useful just once to staff, but rather was a resource that staff could come back to and really utilize and find value in. So with that, I'll move ahead, and I think there's a little lag in shifting from slide to slide, so dangerous to click too much. Terry, nothing's happening on my end. Okay, there we go. So a little bit of background on our project, and I know that we're absolutely preaching to the choir here, but one of the main reasons that we felt like this was a really valuable project and time well spent for us was really because of the inception of WIOA and with it, the common performance measures. And as we all know, the common performance measures have really challenged all VR agencies to sort of reimagine what successful casework and outcomes with customers look like. And so when we were thinking about how can we shift our case review process to support good case practices that we know will help VR customers obtain and maintain those high wage employment activities while achieving post-secondary credentials. And we'll spend a little bit of time on these next few slides sort of setting the stage for you before we. And so one of the things that we first did way early on, way before we started our capstone project, is to do some thinking as a VR management team within our division about how can we all think about rowing in the same direction together. The common performance measures. Sorry, I saw that maybe my voice was a little quiet. We know that the common performance measures are really lagging. They're often data measures that we have that come 2 and 4 quarters after a case has been closed. And so when our VR management team got together, we really wanted to think about how can we identify case practices during the life of a case while the case is still open that are really going to support our customers in doing well, obtaining those higher wage jobs. Data points are often so lagging. And that came to be known as the Careers Initiative. And we've identified 5 leading indicators that sort of make up that bigger Careers Initiative. Okay, so while I wait for the next slide to pop up, if I had to sort of ask you to sort of visualize what our Careers Initiative looks like, if you could think of it as sort of a big completed puzzle with all the pieces in the right place, our 5 leading indicators are sort of puzzle pieces to the larger puzzle. The dashboard that Alice mentioned is a really important piece of the puzzle, as well as what came to be our case review tool. So I'm going to go through and just give you the context for what our 5 leading indicators ended up being, because you'll see why that's so important in the development and how we revised our case review tool. And then I'd like for Alice to just give you a little bit of a description of what our dashboard is, because that's really the data piece that accompanies this case review and the qualitative look at our work. So our 5 leading indicators have really helped to reshape the way that VR counselors approach our work with customers. And just quickly, the 5 lead indicators, the first one is assessment. And so we believe or hypothesize that if we do a better job of using assessments with customers, we'll be able to identify a more thoughtful goal, and that will help lead to more sustained employment outcomes, which of course will improve the likelihood that rehabs are sustained, which has a really positive impact on that common performance measure of the employment rate. The second is strong team involvement. So we believe that strong team involvement helps participants stay engaged and make progress in completing their plan goals. So expanding the team beyond that VR counselor to other members who have expertise, like benefits counselors or assistive technology specialists, really help give customers all of the tools that they need to be more successful. So we believe this will reduce closures due to disengagement, which will have a positive beyond and more about stackable credentials and short-term training programs, because we believe that them participating in those pieces will help increase median earnings immediately post-exit. The second to last, or the 4th leading measure, is career-oriented goals. So we know oftentimes consumers come to us needing those for now jobs, the jobs that just can pay the bills. And in our old paradigm, getting a rehab or helping someone get employed, regardless of where they were working or what their wages were, was a count in the right direction. But now, what we really want to see is that we're helping people get into jobs where there's a ladder, where there's opportunity for advancement, opportunity for earning additional wages or higher wages. And we know that this will help yield rehabs with wages above 125% minimum wage. Lastly, regular follow-up with participants post-hire and exit from our program will really help promote job retention. Checking in with people once they've been employed to make sure they have the supports that they need, that they're thinking about any opportunities for promotion or additional education and training will help people stay employed longer and increase the employment rate. So these are the leading indicators that we really wanted to infuse in our case review process, but it's also been supported by the development of a dashboard, which I'll let Alice talk a little bit about.
Thanks, Amanda. So the dashboard is just meant to make what people are doing in their casework visible on a regular basis and at a very personal level. So the dashboard is refreshed weekly, and it reports on all these 5 lead measures and also the associated lag measures, in addition to workload measures, which is basically, how many applications, plans, employment starts, et cetera, the person has gotten. And also process measures, which look primarily at compliance issues. And this dashboard is available at the counselor level, so they can have very personally relevant information, and at all other levels for the organization, so that we can, keep these things visible to people in their daily practice. Is that what you were looking for, Amanda?
Yeah, that's great,
Okay,
Alice.
thanks.
It's just to say that we know that data tells one side of the story, but that the qualitative aspects are really important to consider. And so all of that background we felt was important to give you as we jump into um, the actual capstone project. And I'll wait for that next slide to pop up. I apologize. I see the chat coming through that my audio is coming in and out. I'm not sure why that's happening. So we spent time talking about the background of our careers initiative because the purpose of our study was really to develop and validate a revised tool and an accompanying guidance document that would align and support the WIOA common performance measures. As we know, the CPMs have really challenged us to shift our focus to reviewing cases for both compliance and quality vocational counseling. And our previous tool, although it was great, mainly focused on case compliance. So we had 3 goals for our project. One was to develop a work group to brainstorm case review questions that would assess both case compliance and quality vocational work done with customers. And this goal was really important to us because we spent a lot of time thinking about how can we involve staff at every level within our division. We know through other implementation projects that getting buy-in and hearing from all staff at all levels really helps them take ownership of a project. So we were really interested in making sure that we brainstormed and thought through these work groups. Our second goal was to create that revised case review tool and the accompanying process guide. And finally, our third goal was to achieve at least 75% inter-rater reliability among reviewers that were using the tool. So we had a few evaluation questions. And we've talked a bit about these already. So how can we develop a case review process that helps to evaluate and measure casework practices in the present so that VR does well on those WIOA measures that are further out? And how can we provide guidance and support to staff so that casework expectations are clearly defined? So for our methods, again, we really utilized focus groups with field staff and managers and supervisors as a way to make sure that everyone really had a voice in this process. We felt it was really important to hear from everybody about the pieces of their casework or their case practices that they feel really help contribute to successful outcomes for customers. So we spent a lot of time in counselor meetings and at some of our management team meetings, just really mining the collective wisdom from as many groups as we could about what they felt was important to include in our revised tool. From there, we developed a smaller work group to develop questions that encompassed both that qualitative and compliance standard. And then finally, the review tool was piloted with our expanded management team to gather feedback and to finally determine that inter-rater reliability. So the way that we went ahead and did our data collection to determine the inter-rater reliability was we had participants broken up during that expanded management meeting into 6 groups of 8 people. Each group reviewed one of 3 redacted cases using the new tool. And then participants compared their ratings and discussed any differences in results. So those 8 people in each of the 6 groups were reviewing the same case using the same tool. So in theory, their results should be fairly similar, or that's what we were hoping. But as we know, case review can be very subjective, especially when you're starting to include qualitative components. So from there, we collected the results to determine the inter-rater reliability and the validity of the review tool. So here's just a quick snapshot of the 2 parts of our case review tool. The first section, section A, is our compliance section. And again, we really wanted to develop this tool in a way that felt usable or user-friendly to our field staff. So in addition to the question, the actual compliance question, as you can see, Alice did a beautiful job here of detailing whether it was a milestone item. So is this an item that would cause an audit finding if it weren't there or weren't done correctly? And finally, is it a data quality item? So would it impact our 9/11 reporting if that piece of information were reported inaccurately or weren't complete? Alice, anything you want to add to this piece here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's just that you cannot, the quality dive into the case is so important because you really can't tell a lot from case, the statistics sometimes. So the alignment between the dashboard and this case review tool is really critical.
Absolutely. So while I wait, there we go. So this is our second part of our case review tool. So again, this is the qualitative section, section B. And this is composed of 7 qualitative questions. And in this section, what we did is sort of give a brief description of unsatisfactory, satisfactory, and excellent. So what does it mean in this case for the initial interview to be satisfactory? And what does it mean for someone's initial interview with a customer to be excellent? And again, this has been a really valuable training tool because counselors on their own can come back and say, okay, what's the expectation of me for information that I really need to be gathering, questions I need to be asking to make sure that my initial interviews are satisfactory, or for those that are really motivated and want to have all of those excellent ratings, they can come back here and sort of see what the expectations are. So the results from our pilot were that the final tool is comprised of 22 compliance questions and 7 qualitative questions. We achieved approximately 68% inter-rater reliability, which we were fairly happy with, again, because there's so much subjectivity when you're reviewing cases, especially with those qualitative questions. And what we've found is that there's been increased compliance in case reviews since we've introduced this tool and the accompanying process guide. And it's been a consistent and universal training tool for staff and supervisors. Some of the conclusions from our capstone or our study were that reviewers ended up suggesting some rewording of some of our questions for clarity. And one example of that is one of the old questions used to read, if the IPE was not completed within 90 days, was an IPE extension completed? Which is a fine question. But you could answer that, yes, the IPE extension was completed, but if it was done on the 91st day, it's really no good to us. And so based on the feedback that we were getting, we edited the question to read, if the IPE was not completed on time, is a reason for the extension documented prior to the 90-day deadline? So rewording some of the questions, this is just one example, making these minor tweaks has really helped to increase the inter-rater reliability because there's not so much wiggle room in how you can answer it. The other conclusions were that again, the accompanying process guide has really been a valuable training tool for counselors and supervisors, and it's really helped establish some more consistent case practices statewide.
I think the only thing I would want to add to that is that the dashboard and this QA process together have also, I think, really improved people's understanding of the data system and the measures. We've seen improvements in the dashboard results. and also just more mastery of the data system, which makes us more confident in what we're seeing in our results.
Absolutely. And I'm waiting for my final slide to pop up. But just to say, one thing I don't think we hammered home enough necessarily is that the development of those qualitative questions really centered around those 5 leading indicators that we spent so much time at the beginning of this presentation really fleshing out for you, because we believe those are best case practices to support consumers to do better on those common performance measures and have increased wages. We really wanted to make sure that when we're reviewing cases, we're really looking for evidence that counselors are engaging customers and thinking about assessment and teaming, and additional education and training. So although you can't see all the qualitative questions, all 7 of the qualitative questions that were on the final tool really hammer home the importance of that and help give counselors an idea of how they should be having these conversations with the people they're working with. And so finally, our last slide, implications for practice or future research. We've found that developing this revised tool and the process guide have really encouraged thoughtful and more regular discussions about casework and best practices. And it's been wonderful because there's been sort of this cross-pollination between offices throughout our state about how people are doing this work and the results that they're seeing with customers. And finally, that the qualitative questions are subjective. Like we've said, it's difficult to achieve a really high level of inter-rater reliability with such subjective data. But we wonder if continued training and discussion of the review tool will help to increase that inter-rater reliability. Only time will tell, but we suspect that the more we talk about it, the more we use it, and the more that we compare results, that will just help to increase consistency. Alice, anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, guys. Sorry for the audio issues.
Okay, thank you, Amanda and Alice. I really enjoyed your presentation. My name is, let's go to the next slide here. My name is Andrew Gray. I'm a program analyst with the Idaho Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. I've been working as a program analyst since June of 2017. I was brought on specifically to work with reporting our quarterly data to RSA. Previous to that, I've been working as a counselor since 2005. And while I primarily worked in our Boise regional office, I did work as well as kind of an itinerant rural counselor. And that kind of piqued my interest in looking at differences in service delivery between rural and urban counties in Idaho. It was something I wanted to look at. And since as a program analyst, I have access to a lot of data, I thought it was a perfect opportunity to kind of look at what our data says about different models of service delivery between urban and rural counties. So Idaho is a very rural state. We are a beautiful state, and we are very resource rich. We're the gem state for a reason, but we are a rural state. All of our population lives in rural counties. So 28% of Idaho's population lives in rural counties, as opposed to a national average of 20%. And rural counties in Idaho have remained focused on agricultural or mining industries. Like I said, we have a lot of resources. Historically, our economy has been based on agricultural and mining. There has been some change as far as modernization, but that those changes in the economy have been localized to certain areas of the state, as we'll see. Urban counties in Idaho present more diverse employment opportunities. Obviously, when your county is focused on agricultural, mining, or other specific industries, there's not as much diversity as you see in other more urban counties where we have things like healthcare, technology, and other industries that have been built up. Employment growth rates have been higher in urban Idaho counties than rural Idaho counties since 2008. So in the Great Recession of 2008, there was a lot of pullback and a lot of employment opportunities throughout the state. And since then, Idaho has been blessed in that there has been a return in a lot of areas to pre 2008 levels, but that rate of recovery has been more pronounced in urban counties than in rural counties. And this isn't just an Idaho theme. We've seen this in at a national level too, in urban and rural counties, where rural counties have not seen as high of employment growth as urban counties, especially since 2008. Just a map here showing the breakdown between urban and rural counties in Idaho. And I've got the urban counties marked in gray and the rural counties in green. And as you can see, there's kind of a patchwork as far as how these counties are distributed. We've got a kind of a corridor, the I-84 corridor, which is one of our major interstates that goes cuts through southwest Idaho, and that's where the Treasure Valley, where Boise and Iridian and some of our other large cities are, Twin Falls, exist along that corridor. We've also got up in the north, we've got Coeur d'Alene area, Kootenai County, which is across the border from Spokane, Washington. So a lot of our urbanness in our state actually is contributed by, I think, out-of-state influences. So again, Idaho primarily is rural, but we do have some urban influences from outside of the state. So in going through the literature, I was able to look at a lot of the rural employment challenges that have come up. And I noticed a lot of these when I was working in the rural setting as a counselor. So I would commute from Boise up to Valley County, McCall, Idaho, which is about 2 hours away. So it's not very far, but it's up in the mountains. And it's a really different environment. And so I saw a lot of these themes that existed when I would talk to my customers up in that area. So one of the challenges that we see in rural counties is a low number of available jobs or year-round work. So I would talk to a lot of people that were patching together several jobs because they weren't able to find a year-round job that matched with their skills and abilities. And so they had to find seasonal work. And they were just looking for maybe another seasonal job to make ends meet. Lower paying jobs, there's not as much competition for work, fewer jobs available, and so the wages also tend to be lower. Jobs require longer travel to work. So again, when I was working in McCall, there was a community about 40 minutes away called Cascade, and a lot of people were driving up from Cascade to McCall to find work, and it was a difficult commute, not just for the length, but also because it was going through mountain passes, and in the winter time it wasn't necessarily tenable. Lack of public or private transportation options. again, the transportations in Idaho overall tend to be lacking in a lot of ways, but at least in the Treasure Valley and in other urban regions, there are a few more opportunities for public transportation if private transportation isn't going to work. Lack of training opportunities, fewer mental health services, and that's combined with lack of services for people with disabilities, and then lack of anonymity and abilities to recover from job terminations or criminal history. And this is one that I saw too as a rural counselor, is that a lot of people would tell me, hey, there are maybe 3 grocery stores in town. I worked at 2 of them and those jobs didn't turn out well. And then the third one won't hire me because they heard about what happened at the other 2. So whereas in an urban county, there would be several opportunities and you might be able to find a different type of job that worked for you, that was similar, but that would work for you, or an employer that would be more understanding. But there are fewer opportunities like that for individuals in rural counties. I had 2 specific research questions that I was looking at. I originally started out with more, but I thought, let's just take a look and see what the data shows us. And as I'll mention later, I think this opens up a lot of good opportunities for further research and things that we can look at. But my first question was, are there differences between the types of services provided to individuals in rural and service counties? Basically, the service model is different, are different types of services, and we're looking at the RSA services here. Are there differences in the successful closure rate for participants in urban and rural counties? And for both of these, my hypothesis was that there would be differences. That somehow, with all these differences that we're seeing in other data with urban and rural counties, that there would be differences in how services are provided, and there would be a difference in the successful closure rate. So as I mentioned before, as a program analyst, I have access to a lot of data, and I'm able to query a lot of data. And so that's what I did. I looked at the data for all participants with our agency with an initial IPE date between 7/1/2017 and 6/30/2020, or program year 2017, 2018, 2019. And I looked at all authorizations for purchase services, and that were provided on those cases. And I was able to pull the begin date of the authorization and the type of service. And then I matched that with the county of residence for the participant at the time of application for VR services. So there were several different dates that I could have pulled, or counties I could have pulled, depending on what where they were in their case. But generally, there isn't a whole lot of movement from one county to the other during the life of the case. And I figured that the application date would be a good date to look at because it was generally stable. We had information on all of the cases. And then I looked at the closure outcome of the case if the case was closed. So the totals that I looked at for the number of services were different from the number of cases that were closed, because some of the cases that we're looking at for the service rate hadn't been closed yet. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this slide right here. This is just showing a breakdown of the total number of services that were provided based on the RSA category. And as you can see in Idaho, we had some services that we provided at a pretty high rate. For example, for rural counties, our top 3 services were assessment services, job search assistance, and then other services. And then for urban, the top 3 were job search assistance, assessment, and transportation. And then there were some services that were not provided at all. So for rural, Uh, we didn't provide any disability related skills training, any extended services or registered apprenticeship training. And then for urban counties, the bottom three were technical assistance services, registered apprenticeship training, and customized employment services. But I want to go to the next slide because I did a chi-square analysis on these uh, distributions. And so this is just looking at where I found a significant chi-square value. And again, the top, I'll do the top, show the top 5 here, were assessment, job search assistance, other services, transportation, and occupational or vocational training for rural counties. And for urban counties, the top 5 were job search assistance, assessment, transportation, maintenance, and other services. So while there are similar services in each of those categories, they're ordered a little bit differently, and the percentages were significantly different between one county and the other. On this next slide, I'm showing kind of the same information, but in a visual. This is just showing the distribution of cases that were provided at a rate of less than 5%, but were still considered significant. And you can see the difference between the services that were provided. So again, for urban counties, job readiness training, counseling on enrollment activities, and instruction in self-advocacy were provided at a significant rate more to individuals in urban counties, but they were not provided at a very high rate overall. And then on the rural side, you have 4-year college training and on-the-job training that were provided in rural counties more significantly, but were not provided at a very high rate. And on the next slide, we're looking at services that were provided at a rate of rate greater than 5%. And for urban counties, they were more significantly provided to service was job search assistance, assessment, transportation, maintenance, diagnosis and treatment of impairments, and supported employment services. Where on the rural side, services provided were other services and occupational or vocational training. Those services were provided at a greater rate than to urban counties. And then looking at the successful closure rate for the urban and rural counties, I did not find a statistically significant difference between the two, and that was surprising because again, I expected to see that with the differences that I already knew existed between urban and rural counties, and also with the differences that I found with service delivery, I expected that there would be a difference in overall closure outcomes, but I did not find a difference there. So my conclusions were that participants in rural counties were more likely to receive certain services than their counterparts in urban counties. And specifically what I found was that people in rural counties were receiving training services at a higher rate than in urban counties. And participants in urban counties were more likely to receive services directed at job readiness and job search. And again, I didn't find any statistical difference in overall service outcome rate, despite differences in the service delivery models. So think about possible explanations for my data. It's possible that employment opportunities not requiring additional training are more widely available in urban counties. And this is really one of the things that I suspect the most. I think looking at the data that we've already looked at, as far as there being more employment opportunities and more diverse economies in urban counties, that there naturally would be more employment opportunities that would not necessarily require additional training on the part of participants. Also looked at providers for job search and job retention services not as available in rural counties. This is something that I noticed as well as a rural counselor. When I started working in McCall, we did have a community rehabilitation provider that was able to assist people in contacting employers and trying to find work. That CRP closed up shop shortly after I started working there. I'd like to think I didn't have anything to do with it, but so we didn't have one. And so that meant that I had to do that as a counselor myself. And we tried to get other people set up, but it was difficult. A lot of providers weren't willing to work up there, even if we helped them with transportation and that kind of thing. And then the lack of vendor support might be responsible for the difference in provision of assessment services. So recalling the slide previously where we're looking at the different services, assessment services were provided at a far greater rate in urban counties. And one of the reasons might be related to the previous bullet, where there just aren't the vendors there to provide those types of services to our participants. So some of the limitations that I recognized in my study and things that might be candidates for future research. Again, we only use authorizations for purchase services. One of the things that we're trying to do in IDVR is to provide more services by staff and to record those services and report those services. And so I think there's a lot more data that's available now that we could look at. What are other services that are being provided that are not necessarily being provided through an authorization, and how can we how might that affect the data distribution? We also didn't look at participant characteristics beyond the county of the application. So again, I think as a kind of a broad look and kind of seeing what differences there might be, I think was a good place to start. But there might be other factors beyond just where someone lives that might be affecting some of the data and as far as what services they're being provided. And so there might be opportunities for maybe doing some more qualitative research where, I think Amanda mentioned that, she kind of started out with the qualitative and maybe it would be good to look at some quantitative data as well. I think I kind of feel I went the other way and started with the quantitative data, but I found myself thinking, yeah, I could really get to a lot more deeper data if I did some qualitative research. And then, are there other measures of case success that could be used other than successful case closure? And I think there too, there's a lot of more data that we have that's coming online as far as performance measures and post-exit data that would be really interesting to look at to see, is this case being successful, not just in a successful case closure, but is it being successful in the long term? And that's another thing that we're looking at in Idaho is trying to pay more attention to our post-exit outcomes. So thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Give me just a second. All right, I got to figure out how to go back here. We've gone to too many gone through too many slides here. But while you're waiting, my name is Kira Hollywood. I am a program specialist for quality assurance and program improvement with the Texas Workforce Commission Vocational Rehabilitation Division. I have been working in vocational rehabilitation for the last 10 years. I started as a VR counselor. I was a VR counselor for 5 years, moved into a management role in our local office, and I have been working at our state office, my current position, for the last 3.5 years. First of all, through this PEQA certification, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone at PEQA TAC for your support through this, Terry, Aaron, and Sue, who helped me during this project, and also my mentors, Christine Johnson, and a big thanks to Dr. Andrew Ney, who assisted me with working out my research and making sure that we stayed on track for its scope. And lastly, to all of my coworkers at TWC, thank you while I was going through this project. And my project was looking at cases closed unsuccessfully after an application for VR services has been taken. So for a little bit of background, if you've been in VR any length of time, you are aware that cases closed after an individual has applied for VR services continues to be of concern nationwide. If you attended the PEQA conference this last year, Christopher Pope talked about numbers in VR, the number of individuals who get to an IPE continue to decline every year. There also seems to be a trend of looking at getting VR customers in the door versus keeping VR customers engaged to successful outcomes. So while there has been research, and I looked at research available, there has been research conducted regarding the long-term effects of case closure without employment for individuals who completed an IPE. I was not able to find much research done regarding effects of case closure after an individual completes an application for VR services, but does not move forward to become eligible for VR services. There also is relatively little research regarding reasons for case closure before successful employment outcomes. There's been a lot of research done regarding successful versus unsuccessful closures, but again, most of that had to do with after an IPE was written for a customer. One reason that research may be conducted more frequently in this area is that historically, due to federal and state funding, it's usually tied to the number of successful versus unsuccessful case closures after a plan for employment has been written for an individual. States also usually have goals regarding the number of successful closures they achieve and how many individuals are working after closure. I know that we have different measures now with WIOA, where we're looking at successful outcomes 2 and 4 quarters out. However, in Texas, we are still required to provide the number of our successful closures to our legislative budget board. So it continues to be an issue to look at those successful versus unsuccessful closures after plan. Now, RSA does require states to report reasons for closure for cases closed after an application for VR services was taken. And while the RSA 911 requires states, VR agencies, to report what type of closure occurred for a case and the reason for exit, I was not able to find any recent studies showing the use of this data to study trends associated with case closure, specifically after an application for VR services was taken. So again, states may tend to focus on outreach in an attempt to recruit more individuals who may be eligible for VR services. However, many cases are closed before an individual is provided with those services. So because of the limited information regarding reasons for case closure before plan, I decided to conduct a study of case closure after application for VR services in Texas VR. So the purpose of this study was to identify the top reasons for case closure for VR services, and in Texas, we are combined blind and general, after an application according to available data and case notes documented in our case management system, which is called RehabWorks. And to determine through research and quantitative analysis any trends related to case closure after application, and identify potential correlations that may indicate a higher risk of case closure after an individual has applied for VR services. So the methods that I used to collect data, data was collected from the Texas Workforce Commission Division of Operational Insight, or DOI, which is a division responsible for obtaining and disseminating data in TWC, and also, since we are with TWC in VR. Information was collected for cases closed after application from September 1st, 2019 through February 28th, 2020, which is 3/4 of data. This captured data for 1,897 cases that were closed after an application for VR services was taken. Cases were then chosen for review from the case IDs that were gathered from the data collection and reviewed in the Texas VR case management system. And again, that's called RehabWorks. So when I looked at the data collection for cases closed after application, I was able to get certain elements that assisted me in determining what I was able to look at for these cases, and that included obtaining the customer case ID, the date the application was taken for VR services, the office location, so what office was the customer being served from, the customer's age, whether or not they were a Social Security disability beneficiary, whether they identified as a veteran, and the reason for case closure, which was documented by the VR counselor. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, which affected my ability to obtain other data from DOI based on other priorities required from the DOI team, there was certain information that I was not able to gather. And also, because certain information is not captured in our system at application, this also made it difficult for me. So I was not able to obtain information on the customer's disability. Currently at application, our VRCs are not required to input a customer's disability into data elements captured in the case management system. Information is available in case notes from the application interview with the customer, but it is not able to be extracted without looking at case notes individually. So reasons for closure after application, I was able to get this information. And again, counselors enter this information when the case is closed, and they have a drop down available to them in the case management system, and this correlates with what is required to be information to be given from the RSA 911. So I decided to look at the top 3 reasons for closure because this made up a very large percentage of our reasons for closure. So as you can see, these reasons, the other reasons that were not in the top 3 were less than 10% for each category. The top 3 closure reasons made up 73% of all closure reasons for cases closed after application for VR services. And just to note, these are also the top 3 reasons for all of our other reasons for closures, unsuccessful closure before and after plan. Again, these are the top 3 reasons as well. So from this list, we can see that the top 3 reasons for closure, the first one is no longer interested in receiving services or further services, which was 34%. All other reasons made up 24%, and unable to locate was 15%. So we define no longer interested in receiving services, and this comes from the RSA 911, as individuals who actively choose not to participate or continue in their VR program at this time. The definition for all other reasons is used when other reasons that are not included in the code values given by RSA 911 1 through 18. And the definition for unable to locate is an individual has relocated or left the state without a forwarding address, or when the individual has not responded to repeated attempts to contact the individual by mail, telephone, text, or email. So to assess these closure reasons for deeper analysis, I conducted a sample of cases to review 4 cases closed in these top 3 closure reason categories. So to determine if case closure reasons selected by the VRCs aligned with closure code reasons they selected in the case management system, I conducted case reviews. I conducted a total of 24 cases. 24 cases were individually reviewed for each of the top 3 closure reasons. So I ended up reviewing a total of 72 case reviews. Cases were selected for review using systematic random sampling. 12 cases were randomly selected for the first quarter for each closure reason, and 12 cases were randomly selected for the second quarter for each closure reason from the data set provided by DOI. I also came up with a list of questions that I answered for each of the cases that I reviewed. And these questions included, did the reason for closure listed align with the reason for closure based on case notes from the VRC? So did case notes align with the reason for closure the VRC selected at case closure? Next, was the customer contacted to be informed of the closure? And this could be that they attempted to contact the customer or actually were able to speak with the customer regarding the case closure, but we had documentation that they at least attempted to contact the customer. Was the customer contacted at any time between the application and closure? So were there any case notes indicating contact occurred between the VRC and customer at any time between the application for VR services and closure? What was the customer's disability based on the customer self-report? Again, VRCs don't have to enter disability information at application, but they do need to enter that information in the application interview that they take. So I looked at that, what we call a diagnostic interview, to determine what the customer self-reported as their disability. And lastly, did other factors possibly affect case closure, such as extension of time or trial work, or I know some states still call it extended evaluation. So was the case put into extension of time at application? So did it take longer than the federally required 60-day time frame to determine eligibility? And or was the case put into trial work services for customers with the most disabilities? So if you're not familiar, if trial work is if there's a question of whether the customer is able to achieve a competitive integrated employment outcome. Pre-eligibility trial work services are used if there's a question regarding if an individual will be able to become successfully employed in that competitive integrated work environment. So a trial work plan is written with the customer, and the customer is required to participate in at least 3 trial work activities in real work settings with a contracted work provider. And VR counselors have a maximum of 12 months to determine if the individual can achieve an employment goal in an integrated, and that means a non-sheltered workshop setting. So let's look at my results. The first is related to customer contact. So again, I was looking at, was the individual contacted to be informed of the closure? And was the individual contacted at any time before closure? So I broke that up into the top three closure reason categories, and here's what I found. Customer contact before closure. So again, there was at least 1 case note indicating the VRC attempted to contact or was able to contact the customer to inform them of the closure. So for no longer interested in services, 21% of customers were not contacted at closure, and 21% were not contacted, at least there were no case notes indicating they were contacted at all between application and closure. For all other reasons, 71% of customers were not contacted to be informed of the closure, and 50% were never contacted between application and closure. And for unable to locate, 50% of customers were not contacted at closure, and 33% were never contacted between application and closure. So we can see that customers who stated they were no longer interested seem to have more contact with their counselors than those that were listed with case closure reasons as all other reasons and unable to locate. Next, I looked at disability information for top 3 closure reasons. And again, because disability information was not available to extract easily from the case file management system, I did case reviews to determine what the disability was at application. I had to do case reviews and look at these all individually. So when I was completing the case reviews, I determined the customer disability by the customer self-report, and I grouped the disabilities into 7 disability group categories that are reported to RSA. And those disability categories are hearing impairment, visual impairment, psychosocial psychological impairment, physical impairment, intellectual disability, learning disability, or no disabling condition. And this allowed me to narrow down disabilities into groups based on self-report by the customer. So for the top 3 closure reasons, when we combined them, intellectual disabilities make up the largest disability group. When looked at individually, customers with intellectual disabilities were the largest disability group for both customers who were closed as no longer interested and all other reasons. For unable to locate, customers with psychosocial and psychological disabilities made up the largest group with 8 out of 24 cases, or 33% of cases sampled for review. Other disability reasons were all very low. Hearing impairments, physical impairments, and visual impairments were 3 or less for disabilities at closure. Lastly, I looked at reasons for closure by case note documentation. So I wanted to see what the VRC stated in their case notes was the reason for closure and what they selected as the reason for closure in the case management system. So overall, the main reason for closure determined by case note documentation from the VRC was that the customer was no longer interested. So overall, in all top 3 categories, 27% of those cases were actually no longer interested by the case notes that the VRC entered. The second highest reason was that the customer was unable to locate. And then lastly, case notes indicated that the VRC did not receive the documents required for eligibility determination. And that could be documents regarding the customer's disability or employment verifications that they were legally able to work. So reasons that customers were no longer interested in services varied case by case. Some individuals didn't wish to obtain employment at the time. They stated they were obtaining employment on their own, or they were no longer needing VR services for other reasons. Errors were identified on 10 of the 24 cases marked as no longer interested, which inaccurately labeled the closure reasons. Those reasons for closure that were in error were that the individual was unable to be located, that transportation was not feasible, or that the VR counselor lost contact with the individual. The top reason for closure for all other reasons was that the customer did not provide required documentation to determine eligibility. So 8 out of 24 cases reviewed, or 33%. Again, the reason was because they did not provide required documentation. The next highest reason for all other reasons was that it was unclear from the case notes why the case was actually closed. So I could not tell from case notes why that case was closed. The reason for closure was actually that the customer was unable to locate. So 10 out of 24 cases, or 42%, were coded correctly. So overall, correct reasons for closure for all groups were not selected most of the time, except for cases closed as no longer interested in services. There was also areas of concern, as 10% overall of these cases revealed that there was a lack of VRC contact, and another 10%, it was unclear from case notes why the case was closed. There were also some other notable findings in my research at this time, and this related, first of all, to customers being listed as no longer interested in services and also being in trial work. For cases closed as no longer interested, 14 out of 24, or 58%, were put into pre-eligibility trial work at application. Because of this significance, I reviewed another 12 cases to get a larger sample. From the second set of case reviews, though, only one case was listed as pre-eligibility trial work. Therefore, it can't be determined at this time if there is a correlation between no longer interested and trial work, and more research will have to be conducted in this area to better determine if there is actually a relationship between cases closed as no longer interested and those cases in trial work. Unfortunately, I was not able to obtain information regarding overall how many cases were listed as pre-eligibility trial work with the case closure reason of no longer interested in receiving services without reviewing each case individually, which would take up a lot of time. However, I do know overall we have an average of about 100 cases in pre-eligibility trial work, at least we did for last year. And while there are not that many cases, these cases do need to be monitored closely to ensure that customers are able to have opportunities to determine if they are able to work in a competitive integrated setting. There was also a small finding in no longer interested in services in customers receiving SSI and SSDI. So 50% of the sampled cases that I looked at were listed as having SSI or SSDI at some point during the life of the case. However, when I looked at all cases listed as no longer interested, customers having SSI or SSDI only made up 8% of all of those cases. However, for all the sample cases that I looked at where customers reported receiving SSI or SSDI, work incentives with individuals at the beginning of their case, there was no mention of talking to the customers about the Ticket to Work program or of benefits counseling. So that, while overall it's not a major finding with only 8%, we do want to make sure that we look at moving forward that customers are informed of the Ticket to Work program. So overall, with my findings, I found that reasons for closure are often not selected correctly by staff when closing a case. So 42% of cases were selected for incorrect reasons for no longer interested in receiving services. And for all other reasons, 8 out of 24 cases should have had another closure reason selected, such as the customer was no longer interested or they were unable to locate. For cases that were closed as unable to locate, the incorrect closure reason was selected 14 out of 24 times, or 58% of the time. And another reason should have been chosen, such as that the customer did not, again, provide the information, or we were not able to get information to make them eligible. And again, 42%, they actually were unable to locate. So we are choosing the correct reason, but not all of the time. And there is a relatively high number of cases that the correct closure reason is not being chosen. Secondly, those with intellectual and psychosocial and psychological disabilities are closed at a higher rate in the top 3 closure category reasons. And we need to do more research as to why individuals come to VR services and then decide they are no longer interested in services, especially those with intellectual disabilities. And again, intellectual disabilities made up the largest disability group closed for the reasons of no longer interested in receiving services and all other reasons. Now, of note, some individuals had been working in sheltered workshops who were closed as no longer interested in receiving services, and that was 5 out of 14 of the cases. 5 out of the 24 cases that I looked at. The writer, I didn't investigate if the individuals were referred to VR services due to requirements of Section 511 in WIOA. So I'm, again, not completely sure if customers are coming to us at higher rates because of the requirements in Section 511. So more research would have to be done on that category. I did not go into that detail about that. Secondly, for both no longer interested in receiving services and all other reasons, the highest disability group was intellectual disabilities, but for unable to locate, it was psychosocial and psychological disabilities. It could be hypothesized that many cases that fall under psychosocial and psychological disabilities could involve more severe mental illness or substance abuse, which could increase the potential for loss of contact with the VRC. And trends seen in my study regarding closure reasons and disability groups do align with other research that I found. And lastly, customer contact after application is critical, and it is important to track and document. All top closure reasons listed found some trends and issues regarding customer engagement and related to the top 3 closure reasons, and continued issues with customer engagement specifically during the time period between application and eligibility for VR services should and will in Texas continue to be monitored. Because of the need to document every interaction with the customer in the electronic case file system, it's unclear if staff are actually contacting individuals and just not documenting this in the case note system, or if there are actual issues of lack of engagement. However, due to the high number of closures, it is more likely that staff are not contacting the individual after application. High caseload sizes and frequent staff turnover may also contribute to issues of lack of communication after application, but I did not address them in this study. VR staff may benefit from training on how to actively engage individuals during the time frame between application to being made eligible for VR services. And I will talk about some of the projects that we're working on right now in Texas here in a minute. And lastly, while there's no distinct evidence forthright, the reason for the number of closures for customers who are receiving SSI and SSDI with their closure code of no longer interested in receiving services may stem from customers not wishing to lose their Social Security benefits when they begin working and the lack of benefits counseling they initially receive when they apply for VR services. Benefits counseling is required in the Code of Federal Regulations. A lot of times that happens after a customer is made eligible for services. We want to make sure that we're getting that to them as soon as possible, or at least letting them know about the Ticket to Work program. So there were limitations to my study. First of all, it was a limited project in scope and duration. So because of this, results that I found should not be generalized as occurring across other state VR agencies without further investigation. Secondly, the data is retrospective. I was unable to make concrete cause and effect conclusions since the cause element has already occurred and I was not able to get real-time data. And the sample of cases that I reviewed is heavily reliant on self-report. That information is entered by the VR counselors. So the validity of the data is also contingent on the accuracy in which the self-reported data was entered and maintained, which can be impacted by each individual counselor's preference and diligence, as well as changing rules and procedures that go around record keeping and case management practice. So again, like I previously mentioned, implications can't account for claims. If something was mistakenly classified or entered incorrectly, again, that needs to be taken into consideration. Next, I want to talk about program improvements that have occurred since I started this project. During the time that I was doing my research, Texas Workforce Commission, VR Services, we did implement enhancements to our case management system. This required all staff to enter more information when they selected the closure code of all other reasons. So now they have to put in more detailed information in a drop-down box about why they're closing that case as all other reasons as opposed to another reason. This will allow us to be able to pull that information and look at additional details and look at any trends and analyze that information. We are now also tracking and monitoring trial work services. That's monitored now at the regional level. And this has really helped our staff. The regional office does case reviews for all trial work, all cases put into trial work. And this allows them to offer training and coaching to staff and ensure that they understand policy and ensure that those customers are getting what they need to determine if working is going to be the right fit for them. And currently in Texas and VR, we have been monitoring cases closed after application for the last year. Our management staff are required to review a sample of cases closed after application every quarter. And based on the research conducted, we'll continue to monitor this area and continue to look for ways to ensure cases are only closed after application if they are appropriate closures. We also have some current projects going on to help our future outcomes. We are discussing upgrades to our case management system or updates to policy to ensure staff are entering disability information and applications. So we're going to try to see if we can upgrade our system and make sure that staff at least put some information about what the customer's self-reported disability is so we can track and monitor customers at application. Next, we also have what we call standardized workflow projects going on. And these include electronic work in progress boards that staff are able to access in Microsoft Teams. And this is allowing them to have a better view of customers in application to make sure that they're contacting them and that customer's case is moving through timely. There are also other projects and tools to help staff better track cases and application status. We have a workflow, a desk aid for staff where they can easily see each step of the process and application they need to do, and also track and monitor when they're contacting those customers. So in conclusion, the top 3 reasons for case closure in Texas correlate with national research. There was a study by Migliore that was conducted in 2017, I believe, regarding customers with intellectual disabilities. And he found that the top reasons for closure for those with intellectual disabilities is no longer interested in services and unable to locate. So again, the research that I found does correlate with that study. Secondly, customers with intellectual disabilities are currently closed after application at a higher rate than other disabilities in the top 3 closure category reasons. And lastly, more research should be done regarding reasons cases are closed after application for VR customers. And in conclusion, there are many factors why a case may be closed after an application for VR services is taken. There's definitely room for improvement for our agency to monitor this area, attempt better engagement with customers, and ensure those with the most significant disabilities are served efficiently while addressing their need for more substantial and in-depth services at the very beginning of their case. The first time that we contact them. And we know that better engagement may lead to higher numbers of individuals being served in VR, individuals being made eligible, getting to plan, and having a successful employment outcome. And my contact information is provided. And lastly, there is a statement that I'm required to show you by state law. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Kira. We appreciate it. And I know we're running a little bit short on time here, but Kelly, if you are still willing to present, we will pass the microphone to you. And in all likelihood, folks, we won't have time for our question and answer session today, but the PEQA team will work with our panelists and will compile the questions that you've been posting in the Q&A and chat features. And we will find a way to get that information back out to you. Okay, so Kelly, I'm going to pass the microphone to you.
Okay, thanks, Kate. And thank you, Kira. My name is Kelly Scott, and I work for the Kentucky Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, where I've been almost 27 years. And I'm currently program evaluator, which I have done for approximately 10 years. I want to thank Purvi Savak, who was my mentor, Sue P., who was my advisor, and Terry Donovan and Aaron Nierenhausen for getting me through the casework. So, sorry, there's a delay. Just give me a second. Okay, so the background, I have presented on this before a few years back, along with Mathematica and ICI. On this project, the SGA project was implemented federal fiscal years 2016 and 2017. At that time, we were a general agency. More recently, we did merge and were combined. At that time, we were general. So we only looked at consumers who received SSDI, non-blind, no other Social Security or SSI benefits. If you remember, Minnesota was also involved in this project, but I will only be looking at Kentucky OVR. At that time, we had 14 field districts, so geographically, so we considered 7 of them treatment and 7 of them control, and with comparison geographical groups, and at least 500 in each group, treatment, and 500 in control. We looked at 4 components, which were faster pace, financial benefits counseling, earlier job placement services, and coordinated team approach. We've had previous presentations and more recently journal articles, which have been very valuable and suggested more long-term follow-up. And more recently, the Journal of VR this summer, Frank Martin and Purvi Savak wrote an article, and it mentioned faster pace being feasible. And part of that is the dynamic IPE, the motivational interviewing, and to reduce the impact of being unemployed and other disincentives. Also, work incentive counselors helped to reassure clients through the process, and also more likely to obtain competitive employment with SGA level earnings. So the goals, purpose of the study was to investigate, for my study, to investigate the long-term effectiveness of the SGA project. To do this, I closely looked at the following 3 goals. The goals were higher wages, faster return to workforce, and the reduction of the dropout rate of VR customers before reaching employment. So to do this, I used 3 evaluation questions. The questions were, did the enhanced services or treatment consumers make higher wages than those who received usual services in the control group? Secondly, did enhanced services consumers return to the workforce sooner than those who received usual services? Or, as we know it, were the days to employment shorter? And lastly, was there a reduction in the dropout rate of consumers? And we think of it as, did more consumers make it to employment? The methods I used. What happened originally in the project, the SGA consumers were indicated in our case management system. Unfortunately, when we merged that data, that was the indicator was erased. So I simply pulled a previous list of consumers involved in the project. And then I used the memorandum of agreement we had with UI to access the wage data. So I took all those cases and updated them with the employee date, wages at closure, closure date, wages for unemployment insurance. When you gather wages from unemployment insurance, of course, they are in quarters. I used all 8 quarters for the calendar years 2018 and 2019. And those who use that data will notice that the wages are usually much less than the closure data because it's looking at the whole quarter as opposed to just weekly wages. I also ran my results through the VR program Eval Coach. I used the VR program Eval Coach at vrevalcoach.com. And it showed that there were similar groups and the difference was caused by the enhanced services. So I felt comfortable with that. And it also looked at compared for gender, race, education, and impairment. And the results were almost identical to my results and showed that they were comparable groups. If you can't see this, that's okay. I'll explain it. The participants were fairly similar in the percentage of male and female. Also similar in percentage of race for white, black, and other races. The education levels were very similar in the 2 groups. I looked at less than high school equivalent, associates or bachelors. And then also looked at impairments, and there was a slight difference in mental impairment, but we felt like that was just due to certain areas having a closer relationship with their community mental health or other referral sources. The question number 1, higher wages. So did those enhanced service consumers actually have higher wages than those in the usual services? And you see at the treatment group, which was 536 individuals, we had 245 who had income, which was 45.7%. In the control group of 520 individuals, we had 223 with income, so that's 42.9%. Then we looked at the average income of those employed. The treatment group for all 8 quarters averaged $10,602. And the control group averaged for those 8 quarters, $8,152. So this was a difference of $2,450 for 2 years, or $1,225 a year, which was equal to $100 per month. And when we looked at those who were above SGA, there were 22 in the treatment group versus 7 in the control. And that was 9% versus 3%. So the interesting part about that is some had actually been closed unsuccessfully, but we were able to find those through the UI wage data. Second, faster return to workforce. Were those days to employment shorter? Then we found that with the enhanced services group, there was an average of 82 days sooner to reach employment, which was 274 days versus 356. Previously, in earlier data, in 2017, when we presented that data, we hadn't had time for those individuals to complete training. So this was, and even includes those who were able to complete training. 82 days doesn't seem like a long time, but when you think it's 2.5 months quicker that you can get to employment, it could be a significant change in your life. Question 3, reduction of the dropout rate. So from that same treatment group, we had 62 individuals more who were employed before closure than the usual services. That's an increase of 33%. There were 46 fewer in enhanced services who did not reach employment before closure. And also there were 55 more individuals in enhanced services who reached successful closure. Again, this is a 33% increase. Of course, you will notice that the rehab rate was very similar because the proportion was similar. But overall, you had more to reach employment, and it was a faster employment. The takeaways from all of this information is basically that it's worth doing what your agency can afford to do. Moving the needle in the right direction is the goal, even if a small amount. We found that DB 101 helped to support our ongoing needs of those consumers who return to work. And the expanded benefits analysis, we expanded in-house so that more consistent services were provided. And the counselors don't have to worry about making the authorization to an outside vendor. So all in all, we found that there were higher wages, more people were employed, and there was a shorter days to employment. Therefore, we consider that to be a success. So if you have any questions, there's my email, kellyd.scott@ky.gov. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kelly. And you fit a lot of very rich information into a short time frame, so we appreciate that. You may have seen in the chat feature, we will not have the live Q&A session today. So in lieu of that, feel free to add any questions that you may have into the Q&A feature in Zoom. We will compile these through PEQA and ask our panelists to help us answer these questions, and then we will post them on the PEQA website. Again, thank you today to all of our wonderful presenters. You provided such rich information and this will be very helpful to colleagues around the country in other VR programs. Again, congratulations for successfully completing the PEQA program. It has been just an absolute pleasure to work with you all, and we wish you all the best ahead. For those that need continuing ed credits, feel free to complete the evaluation form. And I believe Jen Gundlach-Klatt is managing that. She had posted that it will be available on the PEQA website, but I think we typically send something out to folks following. Complete the evaluation, and then we'll be processing CRC credits for you. And last but not least, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Best wishes to you all for a safe and healthy winter and holiday season ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Just a quick note, we'll leave the site open for about 5 minutes for participants, attendees. If you wanted to add a question you didn't get a time to do, or if you want to look, through chat. And I noticed a couple of folks, Kelly is sticking around and Andrew's here, and I think Kira and Amanda. We won't get to the whole Q&A, but I don't know if there's any particular piece you wanted for them, but we'll leave the site open here for a few minutes, again, in case you want to look through chat for something you wanted to write down, or again, if there's a question you'd like to add for our presenters to follow up on. So thanks very much, everybody. Presenters can hang out if you'd like, or you could go back to work. Take your pick.
Thanks, Terry. I have to go feed my 11-month-old. He's getting restless, so I am going to sign off. But
Great.
Congrats to all the other presenters. Well done. Thanks for your time. Nice to see you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thanks a lot.
It's been a long journey, but I'm glad. Yeah, it feels good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations again to you guys. This is not an easy process.
Thanks. Bye.
And to all of our presenters, again, thank you. I will be sending you a separate email here in just a few minutes as well. Yeah, so keep an eye open for that in your inbox.